Hi there, welcome to podcast episode number 18. I am very excited to chat to you today because I finally finished my first sweater project of the year. I can't comprehend how it took me so long, but it is done. I also have major updates on my Esther jacket that I've been struggling with for the last few months at this point. And I have a big new cast on that I also made a lot of progress on. I've done a lot of knitting over the last 3 weeks, so a lot to talk about. And finally, I think all of the projects that I'm actively working on right now are going well. I don't want to jinx anything, but that hasn't happened in forever, so that's great, and I'm going to tell you about all of it. I'm wearing my Lumi scarf, which is my own design, and I'm wearing my penny gloves, which I've finished very recently, so they kind of go together. I mean, this is the same yarn, so they should go together. But yeah, let's get started with my first finished object. This is my ribling sweater by Laura Penrose, and I finished this a few weeks ago already, I believe, because the deadline was coming up and I had to. But at that point, like the last time we talked, I was pretty much done. I believe I was working on the body, and this is a 2x2 broken rib texture, so nothing very interesting was happening. I was just continuing to work in the round until I hit the hem, and the hem, like all finishings, is 1x1 ribbing. At first, I actually didn't really like that. I thought it might look a bit weird to have the sweater in the 2x2 rib and then the finishings in the 1x1 rib, but I actually really like the contrast that it gives. And also all of the finishings have this little detail where you have like a knitted line in there, so one row that is just knit stitches. The collar has it too, I believe, over here, and the hem has, I think, 2 of them even. And I actually really like that detail. It looks really nice, I find. And it doesn't impact the stretch of it at all, so it's not like it makes it any less stretchy. And generally, I really enjoyed working on this project. It took me longer in the end than I imagined at the beginning, because I was very excited to work this top part up here. There's also a lot going on, so there's a lot of shoulder or sleeve shaping happening. I don't even know how many words are used to describe this construction up here. I believe raglan and contiguous is in there, and I think 1 or 2 more. But essentially you cast on in the back, kind of like a European shoulder construction, so you knit flat at first, which was actually quite complicated to do while staying in pattern and increasing and having this dark yarn. But as far as I've seen, that section of the pattern has been reworded a little bit to give you more guidance on how to do the ribbing there, because that was actually quite hard, but it should be easier now. And then you connect in the round over here in the front, and that is where the raglan part of it starts, so you'll be increasing into the sleeves and then sometimes into the body and the sleeves, and maybe at some point also just into the body. I actually don't remember, but that's how you shape this raglan line here. And then I decided to work the sleeves first because I prefer that. And I worked the tapered sleeve option. So there are 2 options. This sleeve that I worked that is a little bit tighter. And then there's also a wider fitting sleeve. It's not super wide in general. I believe this pattern isn't supposed to be worn with a ton of positive ease. You can knit it with some positive ease or some negative ease as far as I remember. And I chose size 3, which gives me exactly 0 centimeters of ease. And that worked out pretty well for the most part. I haven't knitted that many tighter fitting sweaters or garments in general. I've worked one top in the summer that was a bit of a fiasco when I was trying to do the Ivy top by Petite Knit, because I could just never really get the yoke part of it to fit me right. And for this, I would say it worked out for the most part. I do definitely have the intended amount of ease around my bust and on my sleeves and the body and everything. For my personal preference, I think I have a bit too much fabric under the arm here. I just find that it looks a bit goofy with how tight the sweater is everywhere else. But also, like, if you were to decide to knit this with a bit more positive ease, it would look kind of goofy if there was less fabric there, because then it would also look out of balance. So I don't really know if there's a way to fix that, but I think if I were to work this sweater again, I would probably make the yoke a little bit shorter, just so that this point here at the underarm would sit a little bit higher up. But generally, this worked out pretty well for a tight sweater for me. And it was also a really engaging project. I really liked this part up here where all of the action was happening, like all of the increases and connecting in the round and staying in pattern and all that. There was kind of a lot to think about in the beginning. Like, this was definitely the most difficult part of the sweater by far. And then the sleeves obviously have decreases, as you can see here, so you do have to like semi-pay attention to what row you're on and keep measuring and all that. And then the body is essentially just mindless knitting, as it is for most sweaters. So I did enjoy that part a little bit less, but that's quite common for me. I mostly like projects that have something going on, so it was kind of expected that I would find this part more fun, but I mean, there's nothing you can really do about that. For the yarn, I used 𝗙𝗪𝗡𝗧𝗏 for this. I've never worked with that yarn before, and I found it alright, I would say. I would say it's a good yarn for the price, but as you can see up here, it is already pilling on the shoulders, and I haven't even really worn this yet. So I've tried this on for like pictures and stuff after I finished, but I haven't gotten a chance to wear this out, and this was already happening like while I was working on it. So I feel like it probably won't hold up super well. I've also had a lot of factory knots in my balls of yarn, so that wasn't great to work with, but obviously you can get around that pretty easily. It just gave me some more ends to weave in. Like generally it was fine to work with. I think for the price it's a good option. I really like the color, it looks stunning. This is the dark brown, which I believe is pretty new, and I would maybe work with this yarn again if I was either looking for something really cheap or if I was maybe making an accessory project or needed a very specific color, because they do have a big selection there. But I feel like for a sweater project that I'm intending to keep for a long time, it's probably not the best choice. I would probably prefer to spend a year or more per skein and have something that holds up a little bit better. I'm not usually super bothered by pilling, but I feel like I should at least get a little bit of wear out of it before it starts doing that. So I'll see how this holds up, and I will report back probably, I don't know, at the end of the year when I show all of my projects again, and you'll see then how this did. I will too. As I said, I've never worked with this yarn before, so we're gonna see how that goes, and we can move on to my WIPs. I hope you're not tired of this one yet, because I'm gonna talk about my Esther jacket again. For those of you who haven't been following the saga, the Esther jacket is an all-over texture cardigan by Petite Knit that I really fell in love with the first time I ever saw it, right after I had started knitting, and then at some point when I felt semi-confident I could do it, I got yarn for it, and I ended up not casting on for a really long time, and then I swatched for it last summer and cast on last fall, I believe, when my swatch was already a few months old. And at that time when I made the swatch, I had decided I should knit this on 3.5mm needles, which is way smaller than the recommended needle size in the pattern, which is 5mm, and the recommended needle size of the yarn that I was using, which is filcolana Peruvian, and they suggest, I think, a 4 to 5mm needle. Anyway, 3.5 was what gave me gauge, so that's what I used to cast on a few months later without making another swatch. And because I knew I was doing something kind of sketchy, not swatching directly before casting on, I decided to do a mid-project block after the first part, and then after that mid-project block decided to knit a different size in the pattern. So I was knitting a size large and then switched to knitting a size 2XL to give me a circumference that would actually fit me comfortably. And I thought that was the end of it. It was like a bit of back and forth, but it, in my mind, was fine. And I continued to knit almost the entire cardigan. So I had the body entirely done, the hem entirely done. I had half of both the sleeves done. So essentially the pattern was just missing a bit of sleeve and the button band. And I was really unhappy with my gauge. I was unhappy with the hem of it. I was kind of unhappy with my cast on because it was a bit tight. And I just put that jacket away for a few weeks to get a break from it and decide on what to do. And then I swatched for it again because somehow the revelation came to me that probably the issue was the fact that I was knitting on 3.5mm needles. And I figured out that I should have just started on the 5mm needle that was recommended in the pattern, because when I swatched again, that gave me gauge. So that was where I was at last time. Well, I did start again. So I unraveled my old version of the jacket, and this is the new one, and I'm almost at the same point. So as I said, I did a lot of knitting. I cast on in the back again. This is a European shoulder construction, so you cast on this panel here, and then I think at some point you add these front parts over here. So you pick up stitches on the back panel. Where did my sleeve go? Here. You pick up stitches for the shoulder up here, and you knit these front panels. This is so difficult to show. Maybe that works better. So you knit these front parts here, and then you connect in the round under the arm, essentially, so you have an armhole. And then the rest of the body is just the texture pattern, flat, back and forth 1,000 times. So this is what the back looks like, and then I knitted the hem, and I made sure to do an increase row before the hem this time, because what I didn't like about it in my last iteration was that it was cinching in on me, and I just don't find that very flattering on me. So I did an increase row, and I think I could have even used a few more increases. It is still cinching in a little bit, but it's definitely better than last time. And I mean, it's just a hem. If I have to redo that one again, it's whatever, really. We'll see if it works out. And then I started on the sleeves again, and I did actually finish one sleeve almost. So this is my sleeve now. And as you might be able to tell, my gauge in the sleeve and in the body actually looks the same. That was the main reason why I decided to unravel, because my gauge was way tighter in the sleeves than it was in the body, and I could just not figure out how to fix it. And the only thing I didn't do yet was the cuff, because I was kind of unsure if I wanted to do an increase row before that too. This is where I did the increase row, and I just kept going for a few rows before I decided that I don't really like this. So I think I'm just not going to do any increases before the cuff. I'm just gonna let that cinch in. That's kind of its job, I guess. So this is the second sleeve that I already picked up for, and I think I'm just gonna finish that and knit the cuff to pattern and then fix this cuff later. But one sleeve is essentially done, I would say. And I'm now working on the second one. So I'm basically where I was at last time before I decided to unravel, which I'm very surprised by, because the first iteration of this took me weeks and weeks and weeks. I was working on that for so long. I think partly because of the way that I went about working on it. It's not super complicated. Like, the stitches are just basic knit and purl stitches for the most part, and maybe the increase here or there. But obviously there is a lot of texture going on, so you have to work very closely to the pattern. You always have to have the chart open next to you, and I just kept taking like really long breaks in between working on this cardigan. So I would work on it and then like forget about it for 2 weeks and then pick it up again, and there was just a lot of effort involved into getting back into the pattern and understanding what I was doing. And I really didn't want to let that happen this time. Also, I now have a lot of practice with the pattern because I basically already completed it once. So, you know, it was just a bit easier to stay on track and know what I'm doing. And I really made sure to work as much as I could in one go and not like put this away and then pick it back up again later. And also the fact that my needle is bigger meant that my gauge is bigger. So I was working a lot less rows for the length. And since I'm back to working the size large and not the size 2XL, now that I have the correct gauge, I'm also working less stitches. So it was just less work overall. It also made me realize why some of these podcasters that I watch on here can just make so many sweater projects. Like, I'm just so impressed with all of the people on here who basically finish a sweater once a week. And I just didn't understand how they were doing it before I knitted this essentially once in a 2XL and once in an L. Because even though it was just a 2 size difference, this was so much faster. Like, all of these girlies that I see on here that are so fast with their knitting, they're all knitting a size extra small. And I understand now why they are so much faster. They just have so much less knitting to do. I don't know how that didn't occur to me before, but that might be why. So I'm having a lot of good revelations with this project. I'm very happy with the way it looks. I'm still looking forward to blocking it because it is a little bit like stiff under the arm, I would say. So when I wear this and I let my arm hang downwards, it kind of bunches up weird here because the fabric is just very stiff with this moss stitch. I'm hoping that will be fixed when blocking, but I think from what I've seen in the projects section on Ravelry, it should be fine. So I would say I'm on track to finishing this. I am still having fun with it, despite this being the second time that I'm working it. I'm looking forward to the button band because I've never worked that one before. I haven't gotten to that point yet, but other than that, it's really just this sleeve, and then I'm basically done. And I'm very much looking forward to being done with this. Even though I'm having fun, I just want the finished object. I've been wanting this for so long, and it's taken so long to make it, and now it's getting warm again, so I'm hoping I can at least wear this for like a week or two still. So hopefully that will be semi-soon. I also, of course, started another project. I just couldn't help myself, and it is also a very warm sweater, so we will see how that one goes. But essentially I got a bunch of istex léttlopi a few months ago because I was intending to design a sweater with it. And I did start on designing it, it wasn't working out, and I was going back and forth, which is quite normal with designing, but I just realized a few weeks ago that at the moment I just don't have the mental capacity to be designing a sweater. I just can't like stick to focusing on that. I have a lot of other projects that also needed a bunch of my attention, weren't going well, needed adjustments and all of that. And I just couldn't figure out how to find the time and motivation within myself to actually design the sweater. I was really excited about the yarn, and I was becoming less and less excited about my design as I continued like working on it here and there. And like a few weeks ago, I just decided, you know what, I'm not doing it. Why am I like forcing myself to make this design if I'm not having fun? I should just find a pattern that I can do with the yarn that I have here, because that will be a lot easier, and I can use the yarn. I like this yarn, I like the colors that I have, and it's a sweater quantity, so I can definitely come up with something, and I did. So I did some browsing in Ravelry, and I decided to knit a pattern called 𝗙𝗕𝗡𝗗𝗗, which is a vintage Icelandic pattern. I believe it might have been published by istex itself. I'm not really sure. I'm kind of struggling to find information about it. So there is a Ravelry page for the pattern, and it is also on the istex website, but it doesn't even like say a real release date. It just says that it's a vintage pattern, and from what the picture looks like, the picture is black and white and the people look very old-timey. So I think it is a vintage pattern, but I don't really have a ton of information about it. It looks stunning either way. And it is a colorwork sweater that has a bit of like design up here. It's a round yoke and then some horses running around your yoke here, and the rest of the sweater is just plain. And well, this is my version. I've already done a bunch of work on it too, so I'm already finished with the yoke. I'm working on the sleeve right now. So that went pretty fast, and I am honestly so happy that I decided to use the yarn to just make this pattern, because this looks stunning. I'm very excited to have this as a finished object. I'm having fun knitting on this. I don't have to have like stress in my mind anymore about designing something with this, and I feel like this is a very fitting sweater for the yarn as well. I mean, it is the recommended yarn for it, so that makes sense, but it's an Icelandic yarn, it's an Icelandic pattern, and I've been wanting to like knit a vintage like proper wool sweater for a while, so this is bringing me a lot of joy. I've maybe worked on this for weeks, so I actually was very fast. I got insanely excited about this for some reason. I just think the horses are so cute. I was never a horse girl, but they're adorable. I don't know. Where do I start with this? So it is a vintage pattern, which means that the design is a bit different than probably people would go about designing nowadays. It is knitted bottom up, which as you can clearly see I am not doing. And there are also like a few smaller parts about this, like the finishings are all written to stitch in like a lot. Also there are 16 stitches cast on at the underarm, which is a lot of stitches that probably wouldn't happen in a modern pattern. Like a bunch of these like little things that I decided to change about it. So actually this has a laundry list of adjustments, but the main thing that I changed looks wise is actually the color work and the yoke, because I had one ball of the red here and I had 3 balls of the blue here and then 10 balls of the white, I think. And that just didn't quite work out with the yarn recommendations that were in the pattern. So for the pattern, the yoke actually has a different background color than the rest of the sweater, and there's like one more colorwork motif here where you switch colors after the yoke. And I just decided to not do that. So the background color of my yoke is the white, and that's also going to be the color of the rest of my sweater. And then I used my 2 contrast colors to do the colorwork design up here. I think it also wouldn't have worked out if the blue was like the background and then the horses were red. Like that would have also looked really weird. I don't think that would have really gone together. So I don't know if it's really a thing that's allowed to change like a traditional vintage pattern like that. But that was just the yarn amounts that I had, and that's what I did. So I left most of the design the same. I essentially just omitted this one motif here, and the background color is going to be the same all over the sweater, but I think I kept the spirit of the pattern for the most part. And then obviously I cast on up here instead of working bottom up. I also used the amount of stitches that I needed for the beginning of the yoke to cast on. So in the original, this collar part is written to have a bunch less stitches. So if you're coming from down here, you're supposed to work decreases here. Or in my case, I would have cast on less stitches here and then worked increases for the yoke. But I just didn't do that at all. I just cast on the amount of stitches that I would need to have here. And I think that's fine for me. Like it wouldn't have needed to be any tighter. And I will also do an increase row before the hem again, which if I was following the pattern, that should be a decrease row actually to make the hem even tighter. I think I will let the cuffs cinch in. That is my plan for now. But generally I'm changing like a few things here and there about this pattern, but I'm also filming a project vlog about it. So if you're interested more in depth about what I'm doing there, you should check that out once I'm done, which I don't know when that will be. But if the last week is any indication, it should probably be really soon. I'm knitting the men's size too. That would give me, I think, like 20 centimeters of ease, if I'm remembering correctly, like 20 or 25, something like that, because the woman's version would have only given me like 10, and that's not really what I prefer. I wanted a big sweater, and then there's just a kid size, so it's not a very size inclusive pattern. But I mean, I feel like for round yoke sweaters, it's pretty easy to make adjustments yourself if you really want to. You obviously have to have some experience with knitting, but it's one of the easier pattern designs to make adjustments to, I find. And for now, I've been working on the sleeve here. And honestly, this project has been going really well. Like, I haven't run into any major issues with it, or any issues really. The only thing I'm a bit unsure about is my needle size. So I'm working on 4mm needles, which I've swatched on and hit gauge on and everything. I've just found that the needles that I'm using here for the sleeve, these are like 40cm cable needles, and they're 4mm. So when I measure them, they do give me the result. This is a 4mm needle. But they seem smaller to me than my other 4mm needles, which is kind of weird. Like, this is another pair of 4mm needles that I've been working on, and when I hold them up next to each other, they just seem like they are different sizes. And when I measure them, which I have a little plastic card, I guess, that you can slide your needles through to see which hole they fit into, essentially, they both like only fit the 4mm hole properly, but this one fits in there like barely, and this one just kind of slides through. So this needle is a tiny bit smaller than this needle, just not small enough to only be 3.75. So I found that I had some trouble like keeping the same gauge I had in the yoke for the sleeve, because I'm now working on this different needle. And that's not a problem I've really ever run into before. I think it's probably just because these 2 needles or 3 needles with the other one that I used are all from different brands. So I guess they're not the exact same size, but I've never really noticed that when knitting as much as I have noticed it here. So I've been trying to keep my gauge a little bit looser for this sleeve than it was for the yoke, which is a bit goofy to do, but I mean, generally it's a very oversized sweater, so I don't think I've run into any trouble with it. I'm just hoping that it all looks cohesive, but also the yarn is very uneven in a sense. Like, it's a very rustic yarn. I don't really know about spinning a lot, so I can't really tell you the way that it is spun. There's parts of the yarn that are way thinner than other parts of the yarn, which is making like staying on the same gauge a little bit more difficult, but I mean, it is supposed to be like a more rustic, woolly, wintry sweater, so it's all fine. I'm very happy with it, especially this part up here looks so stunning. The horses were a little bit more difficult to work because they have like crazy long floats, so I was doing some jacquard ladders and float catching in the back, and I think my tension is probably not the most even it's ever been for the horses, but it's all right. They look like horses. I can tell what they are. They look cute, and I mean, I'm gonna block this, so that should fix some of it. And well, this is just gonna be my fun mindless project for now that all of the color work is done, and I can have my Esther jacket as the more complicated project. I don't have any acquisitions. I don't honestly have any plans. I just want to finish what I'm working on. I still have my Sunday socks flying around somewhere over there. That's just like a basic petite knit sock pattern that I've been working on with a skein of yarn that I got gifted for weeks at this point, because I keep trying to make adjustments and they keep not working out, so I keep having to start over, which is a little bit ridiculous, but I haven't really picked these up recently. As you can see, I did a lot of knitting on other projects, so they are just not the most fun, honestly. I will probably finish them at some point, but we'll see about that. I'm happy just finishing my Esther jacket for now and the horse sweater that I started, and then at least I'll have a couple of sweater projects for the year, because I've been struggling so much with finishing something. It's actually ridiculous. I've made a few like really nice accessories this year already, but somehow the sweaters have been slow. I'm glad I got started on it now, and I hope to show you more finished sweater projects in the next podcast episode, so I hope I'll see you there. I will be releasing my ribling project vlog sometime in the upcoming weeks. I guess that's very dependent on when Laura is done with the pattern and puts that out. I don't think we have like a super official release date yet, so I will see when she releases the pattern. The next Wednesday is when my project vlog will be out. And then I'm also filming one about my jacket and my sweater, if you're interested in that, at some point once they're done. And I hope all of your projects are going as well as mine were these last 3 weeks, and I'll see you soon.